How about a little mountain drive, huh? Find something good in the radio, will you?
You want to hear 94.9?
No. What are you, 12? There's got to be a decent jazz station or something. Squad's recent playtest saw tweaks to Gunplay. It was an experimental build, so we don't know how it'll look upon release, but that's not going to stop me from speculating. Squad devs operate behind a bit of an iron curtain, where, much like the Wizard of Oz, patch notes are accompanied by a few smokes and mirrors, and sometimes even the placebo effect. That might sound flippant to some, but my fellow Squautists will know what I mean when I say that sometimes you can't tell if something feels different or if you're just imagining it. Like an uncanny valley of weapon handling, there's a point where your own ability to recognize changes is called into question. This compounds with the fact that most people that have strong opinions on this stuff, like myself, are also going to be dealing with their own existing biases, which are inescapable no matter how objective you think you are. Everyone should be cognizant of how emotional attachment to something, even to your own opinions, can cloud your ability to be objective and to think clearly. It's good to step back and take a sterile assessment of things, especially when it comes to something as important as video game mechanics. I think a lot of people have that problem, and I think it applies to a lot of other things, not just Squad. And I don't want to be like them. Now, I don't blame them for being tight-lipped about this stuff. It's already somewhat of a meme in the community. Not only do I think it's okay that the devs work like this, but it'll probably make for a better product over time. One, because I'm sure it makes it easier to experiment on test builds purely from a process and procedural standpoint. And two, it's probably better for their mental health. The Squad community is a bunch of psychos, and I would know
Because I'm one of them.
When they do a playtest, part of what I think they're looking for is basically to see how people react and what they pick up on. Yeah, I think they stealth tweak stuff. I really have no way of confirming this, it's just a hunch, but trying the recent playtest build came with this feeling that was a lot like when you get behind the wheel of your car after letting a friend borrow it, but damn, how did I have these set before? The reason I'm talking about all this is because there's things I think I've noticed in the playtest that others didn't, and vice versa. And at a certain point, if you're being honest with yourself, you'll find it difficult to take super hard stances on a lot of this stuff. That said, as my audience surely knows, when it comes to arguing with strangers on the internet, I fucking love to dig my heels in. So, what's my take on the weapon handling tweaks? Meh. Certain things are noticeable, but pretty subtle. The biggest changes are that, 1, the battle rifles are less unwieldy, which, hey, fair enough, the G3 just wasn't as usable up close when compared to something like the M4 and those types of guns. And I say that as someone that loves the MEA faction. And 2, you're now more accurate when you walk, aim, and shoot when you have full stamina. In both of these categories, they retain the same feel while tapering down on the extremes of the barrel misalignment. Meh. My opinion hasn't changed on this. Most FPS games don't correctly model how difficult it is to move and shoot accurately, and that still applies here, and I think this is a step in the wrong direction with that in mind. But damn, I can't help but be excited about how much less bitching and moaning there's gonna be. Now, the Squad Discord is still going to be an unusable dumpster fire that's filled exclusively with disgruntled weebs and furries, so business as usual there, but in general I think this is going to bring a lot of people back into the fold. I guess a lot of people really crave that less challenging, more responsive, more forgiving weapon handling. I don't. The first FPS game that really blew my mind was Operation Flashpoint. We are not the same. But I'm willing to compromise, especially if it means that old school players will return to the game. On top of that, let's be honest, in terms of weapon handling and reticle abuse, it's still a more punishing and difficult experience compared to most other shooters out there. Remember, the walking buffs only go into effect when you have full stamina. If you're at 50% stamina and you ADS and walk, you're still noodles, baby. So we're moving away from the run and gun meta and more towards a walk and gun meta. In my opinion, that's going to push firefights in a more gamey direction, but it's not the end of the world. People aren't going to hold angles as long, people are going to be moving more, and therefore dying further away from their medic. Meh. Even in the live build, I still think it plays too fast and feels too much like a Hollywood movie, and not enough like the awkward and brutal reality of exhausted and sleep-deprived conscripted soldiers running over difficult terrain while being forced to fight to the death with dated service weapons that are covered in mud. There's some concern that some of these changes are going to make it easier for would-be sprinters to get shots on target faster than before, and that this will make engagements play out faster. I guess we'll see. I'm not about ready to whip out the pitchforks yet, based on what I've seen. And trust me, I keep my pitchfork sharpened and well-oiled. It looks to me like these changes are meant to improve accuracy and snappiness for room clearing and close quarter work, and those surprise engagements within 100 feet. But the problem here, and what I'm more specifically concerned about, is that this will also make you more accurate at long ranges, and that these accuracy buffs don't stay within the realm of CQC and mid-range fights. Whenever your cone of fire gets tighter, your groupings get tighter at range. There's no way around that. If you're engaging a target that's 200 feet away or more, and your intention isn't just to suppress, but actually to hit the target, you're not going to be walking while you shoot. Unfortunately, these changes are going to make that a little bit more effective. Your stability should matter more at range. If you have an unstable firing position, you cannot quickly ADS and hit a target at 200 feet in the real world. You're going to come to a halt, adjust your footing while you steady your rifle as best you can, maybe crouch if you've got the time, and then fire. But as walking sway gets tightened, and as the FPS gurus master it, it's absolutely going to increase lethality at range. I get it, we want to avoid the Boondocks thing, obviously.
よく見て、これがいわゆるニガーモーメントってやつだ。ニガーのように。ニガーモーメントは予測不能。
なあ、ちょっと待てよ。
But above that, what I want to avoid are those situations where your head explodes from shots 100 meters away by someone that is currently halfway through running a marathon. And I think we're probably still fine in that regard. Marathon runners are still going to be noodly. It's the power walkers that scare me. We'll see soon enough, I guess. My main problem with pre-ICO squad was that if you're a moving target and you get one-tapped at 100 plus meters, the shooter needs to have been at rest, holding in a strong firing position, and waiting for you like a hunter. Most of the time, shooters will not have been in that position, and when you see a target 100 plus meters out, you're probably going to be mid-stride. If any changes make it easier for a mobile shooter to see me, achieve sight picture, and then shoot my head within 2 seconds, I'm going to call bullshit and bring the pitchforks out of retirement. I think the trade-off here is how much close-quarter noodliness are you willing to tolerate in exchange for a more accurate model of long-range fights with longer TTK and fewer head pops. And I would argue it's worth tolerating a whole lot if it yields things like volume of fire tactics and not turning every rifleman into a head-clicking machine limited only by walk speed. Aiming for the head is a for-fun luxury that only gamers get to enjoy. This applies doubly when you're taking fire or are riding out a cortisol or adrenaline dump. If you refuse to aim center mass in a close firefight, you should be at a disadvantage. I'm fine with well-measured tweaks to close quarters full stamina shooting, but not if it pushes your lethality out another 80 meters while moving and shooting. Perhaps we balance that out by increasing run speed to make the target harder to hit. Well, now you're in power creep territory, and that's exactly what has resulted in hundreds of identical tactical shooters that play like a John Wick flick. My fear is that any accuracy buffs to shooting while moving will leave the realm of reasonable approximation for the average soldier and instead transition into the realm of power creep arcade game. And I think the dev team doesn't want that either. And that's really the main point I want to make clear to the ICO enthusiasts out there that are skeptical of these changes. I'm convinced that the team working on the weapon handling has pretty good instincts on this stuff. Implementing the ICO in the first place took balls. Given the extreme pushback to the ideas behind the ICO, the fact that they let the player base marinate and adapt to it this long without tweaks, to me, is indicative of neutron star levels of testicular density. And guess what? They were right to do it that way, and they were rewarded for it. A lot of salty people are coming back to the game now. Hell, even Comp is starting to show signs of life. Why? Because post-ICO Squad is fucking awesome. And now the dev team is back in the kitchen, I say let them cook. And I say that for selfish reasons. If they can find a happy middle ground on some of these really contentious changes, well, that will buy them time and a little bit more space to experiment in other areas. I try not to see it as a tweak things in a pro-ICO direction or tweak things in an anti-ICO direction. It's more of a tweak things in the direction of accurately modeling combined arms fighting. Do that well, and then sit back and watch as real-world tactics and strategies become more efficacious. And voila! The way people play the game will yield the realism and immersion that we all seek. And that's the kind of realism and immersion you can't code. Here's a short list of infantry and gunplay nerfs I'd be into precisely for this reason. Swinging your rifle around should have a bigger debuff on stability. Punish flick shooting by making it harder to do the herky-jerky swings of your 18-inch barreled rifle. That and free look is way underutilized. Give players a reason to use it. Instead of swinging your entire torso left and right when you snap check your corners, your rifle should stay in place and you should just turn your neck. The difficulty of the terrain should impact your stability, ADS time, and sight picture. Mud and sand and rocky terrain currently affect vehicle handling. That should also be true for gun handling. Running across a sand dune or establishing a firing position on top of a bunch of rocks is slow. A return of the wider free aim when point shooting. It felt great right after the ICO, and now everyone has had time to learn it better. It took a while, but it seems to me like people are finally understanding that they can use the barrel to aim. Reject modernity. Return to Operation Flashpoint.
War's boring. Anyone else bored?
You should learn to appreciate any downtime, Koslowski. Makes combat more exciting.
Weapon jamming. Do it. You know you want to. None of these things would ever have been on the table given the environment immediately after the ICO. After this next update, I'm hoping the community chills out a little bit, which might buy OWI some space to keep innovating, which if you enjoy Squad, you should be encouraging them to do. In a certain sense, they're in the Wild West of FPS game design, and if you're not excited by that, then go play a different game. FPS gaming is pretty stale from where I'm standing. Please, let's push some boundaries. Alright, I saved this part for last because fewer people are likely to watch this long, and if I'm correct, and these are intentional changes, that I actually don't want people to notice them, lest they take it as another opportunity to bitch and moan about something that they aren't smart enough to realize is for their own good. Here's two things that I might have noticed about the gunplay that I haven't seen anyone discuss elsewhere. It seems to me like more gas and smoke gets ejected from the barrel. Maybe it was just a layer in the lighting, but it would be big if true, because this obscures your target and makes it slightly easier to spot you in foliage. It's also something that doesn't nerf close quarters, but does nerf range shooting. The other thing is more frequent momentary occlusion upon trigger pull when you're aiming down the scope. One of the things I loved in early playtests that got scaled back was the brief scope blur upon firing. The effect it had was lengthening the time between accurate follow-up shots. And it got scaled back because people complained because apparently it induced acute vertigo and motion sickness and people were vomiting uncontrollably all over their keyboard. What, you don't believe me? Well, it's true, pal. People don't lie on the internet. Anyways, what I noticed, now instead of blur, it's the occasional brief loss of sight picture. If this is true, and it wasn't just a placebo, then hell yeah, because it would be an elegant way of increasing the time between follow-up shots without blurring reticles too much, and giving people headaches. A change like that would help balance those long-range insta-gibs, because if you miss that first headshot, well, now I've got a tiny bit more of a chance at slipping away once I hear the round impact. Go deer hunting. You typically only get one shot, and you gotta wait for it. That said, all of this could just be misreading the footage, and the placebo effect is real. There's also a sensitivity on shift press that threw me off too. Seriously, how have you people been playing squad without a button on your mouse that temporarily lowers DPI? More still, I spent the whole playtest squad leading because my team wanted to try hard and I'm a sucker for going maximum squad. Who can resist the allure of beating the devs at their own game? So I wound up doing less shooting, more map voting, more map watching, and my attention was more on game flow rather than taking a magnifying glass to the gunplay. So I guess the only thing I'm fully convinced of right now is that I'm not fully convinced of anything. And if our noodles come out al dente, so be it. Maybe that frees up some design space to push more boundaries and help move Squad towards being one of the deepest and most challenging shooters on the market. I say let them cook, man.
Hello. Welcome. We got Robbie on the guitar, Soso on the bass, Ilya on the drums, David on the keys. My name's Seba. Thanks for tuning in.